By 2020, Taylor Swift had already achieved global commercial success across multiple genres. However, her position within critical discussions of popular music remained more contested.
Nice to meet you, where you been? I could show you incredible things. Oh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do.
From successfully switching genres multiple times, evolving from country roots into mainstream pop with 1989, and later incorporating darker synth pop and experimental elements across Reputation and Lover. These transitions were widely recognized as evidence of artistic versatility. Yet the critical conversation often centered on her commercial reinvention, while her songwriting, despite being central to her work throughout, remained comparatively underexamined. This is not to suggest that Taylor Swift's songwriting went entirely unrecognized. By 2020, she had already received widespread praise from fans, industry figures, and many critics.
She's a really good songwriter.
You're one of the hardest working musicians in the world.
Taylor's one of the best songwriters on the planet.
However, discussions surrounding her career were often dominated by factors beyond the music itself. Her public image,
The singer was never made aware of that lyric.
I'm really glad that you have the respect to call me.
Just like speaking the truth, like he called her.
highly publicized relationships,
Taylor Swift and Calvin Harris.
Taylor Swift and Jake Gyllenhaal.
What makes a good boyfriend?
Oh, I haven't figured it out yet.
celebrity status, and repeated genre reinventions,
The only one who's got enough for me to break my heart. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22.
frequently occupied the center of the conversation. As a result, her songwriting was often treated as one aspect of her success, rather than the foundation upon which that success had been built. In 2020, that dynamic would begin to change.
It was really amazing when it opened up my world. I don't think my songwriting has ever been the same after Folklore.
As the music industry slowed, Taylor Swift quietly began work on a project unlike anything she had previously released. Stripped of the traditional promotional cycle and disconnected from the spectacle that had accompanied much of her career, Folklore would arrive under very different circumstances. Unlike the bright synth-pop of Lover or the darker electronic production of Reputation, Folklore adopted a far more restrained approach. The album largely abandoned the polished pop structures that had defined much of Swift's output throughout the previous decade, instead embracing sparse instrumentation, muted production, and influences drawn from indie folk and alternative music. Equally significant was its approach to storytelling.
Could I get enough plot points in a 3.5-minute song to where people felt like they read something? That sort of character play in my songwriting since.
While Swift's earlier work often drew heavily from autobiographical experiences, Folklore expanded beyond the confines of personal narrative. The album introduced fictional characters, interconnected storylines, and perspectives that extended beyond the singer herself. Songs such as Cardigan, August, and Betty formed a narrative trilogy, while other tracks explored imagined lives, historical figures, and constructed scenarios. This shift altered the way the album was received. For perhaps the first time in her career, discussion surrounding a Taylor Swift release was less focused on identifying real-world inspirations and more focused on the writing itself, its structure, imagery, characterization, and narrative ambition. The result was not a reinvention of Swift's songwriting abilities, but a reinvention of the context in which those abilities were being evaluated. Many of the techniques celebrated throughout Folklore, detailed storytelling, vivid imagery, and emotional specificity had been present in her work for years. What changed was the framework through which audiences and critics were now engaging with them. Folklore made it increasingly difficult to dismiss Swift's songwriting as merely autobiographical. By expanding beyond first-hand experiences and embracing fictional characters, historical narratives, and imagined perspectives, the album showcased a level of narrative ambition that challenged many of the assumptions that had long surrounded her work. At the 63rd Annual Grammy Awards, Folklore received the award for Album of the Year, making Swift the first woman to win the category 3 times. The victory represented more than commercial success. It signaled a broader critical acknowledgement of an artist whose songwriting had often been overshadowed by discussions of celebrity, public image, and reinvention. While Folklore did not transform Taylor Swift into a great songwriter, it transformed the way her songwriting was perceived. The album provided a framework through which audiences, critics, and the industry at large could engage more directly with the craft that had always existed at the center of her work.